Since the preliminary task, I've learned a lot about Photoshop. For example, tools such as Liquify, which has helped me edit the photos and make my models have more perfected figures. Also, things such as the spot healing brush have been used to remove blemishes from the skin and kind of soften the skin and make it look more perfected, whereas before I wasn't as experienced in using this and therefore I didn't have the skills that I needed to use that tool well. Also, things like changing the brightness and contrast, my skills have been improved by doing that and experimenting more with different photos and which contrast suits which kind of photo better. I've also had greater experience using the elliptical marquee tool and cutting out images to make, more accurate selections of things. So it's made it. I think I've just improved on a whole with Photoshop, like adding text to it with effects such as the drop shadow and the gradient effect, and having a light behind text to mirror the genre of music that I've chosen. Just all the skills that I originally had in place for the preliminary task have been improved on with a greater experience in this task. Another skill that I've improved is the techniques used for layout, because through the research into other magazines within the same music genre, I was able to obtain knowledge on some key layout and design features that would improve the professionalism of my magazine. Also, in the prelim task, which was creating a school magazine, it required a more formal aesthetic rather than, a less formal, more youthful, musical theme. So the formal look had to match the content and the target audience and come together as a whole thing and be appropriate to be distributed within a school. Otherwise, because more rock or indie genres would require a messier look, but there was still quite a slickness kept with this magazine because of the dance genre, but the skills that I used in the prelim task weren't the same as what was used in the actual task to make the music magazine. The school magazine was targeted at kind of a student age or the students' parents. It had to be kind of applicable for everyone. But because this magazine was purely at like 16 to 24-year-olds, youthful but not, young, as in early teens, it had to have a appearance that would be desired by that audience. So it had to be slick but interesting at the same time to reflect like the atmosphere and the lifestyle associated with house music and clubbing. For example, in a school magazine, the contents page had 3 columns, whereas in the actual magazine I made, it had just the 1 column and then along the bottom with a larger picture, because that's what I've seen in other magazines of this genre, and therefore I knew that it was more applicable to this and would appeal more to my target audience. Specifically with design features, I feel like I know a lot more of the necessary ones which are required in a music magazine, which obviously they wouldn't have been required in a school magazine, but I didn't actually know to include them in the magazine at all before. These include, having the page numbers at the bottom or the magazine, the web address, having a border around the page or a special design feature in the corner that reflects the photos that you've taken. Just something that makes the page more interesting and also helps create a more professional look. Another thing would be like pull quotes, having them in the middle of text or on a photo, things that are what is found in an actual professional magazine, but also fits the genre and I wasn't able to do that in the preliminary task, so that skill has been developed greatly. Although the language used in the prelim task was appropriate for the magazine, I feel like with my music magazine, it contained even more specific terminology relating to that genre, such as, locations like Ibiza or, clubbing. Those kind of words really appeal to the reader more than they would to any other genre. It's important I've found as I've created this magazine that it's important to have language which the target audience can relate to and that appeals to them rather than something that's more formal and doesn't really suit the genre. And the content on both obviously paired with the purpose of the magazine, but the music magazine had to have a more varied selection of content which covers a wide range of topics because that's what the reader would find interesting rather than a kind of a very narrow selection of content which had to be just about one specific theme. Having this in a music magazine meant there was much more that could be explored, and also the titles had to be a bit kind of shorter and snappier. They had to really give the reader enough information quickly to make them want to buy the magazine and make them want to continue reading the magazine. So it was really important to improve my skills in the language kind of area of the magazine, which I don't feel like I really had in the preliminary task. In terms of photographs, I've learned that it's better to have a wide range of photographs rather than just only medium shots, only long shots. It's good to have some close-ups, some long shots, full body, medium. It makes it more interesting to look at and displays like kind of the skills that you've learnt as well as kind of suiting the genre and making it more aesthetically pleasing. I've also learnt that angles are important in the photos. Sometimes it's good to have, different angles, some that are straight on, like direct to the face, some that are kind of coming from the side, things that just make it more interesting to look at and different from other magazines that are in the genre already. I also feel like I learnt a lot about colour schemes and how the colour scheme links with the house style and keeps the whole magazine looking fluent and, continuous. But the colour scheme really has to match the purpose of the magazine. For example, in the school magazine, as you can see, there was a lot of blue and yellow to match the logo of the school and make sure that it was definitely associated with the school environment. Whereas in the dance magazine, in DMC, it had a lot of darker colours, some red, some silver, things that are a bit more reflect nighttime, reflect the music, reflect the interests of the reader. It really has to link with what the purpose of the magazine is rather than kind of just looking pretty or looking nice. It has to be relatable to them and be interesting to them and reflect not only the purpose of the magazine but what's within the magazine, who it's for, the atmosphere that's associated with it. For example, there was a lot of red used because, red is used in a lot of lights in clubs, and there are a lot of lens flares on photos because of the lights in the clubs, and, and when they have concerts, there's a lot of kind of lighting that's important to creating that atmosphere and that show. So it was important to include this in the magazine in multiple areas. I got more feedback on my graded task than on my preliminary task because it was not more necessary for me to understand what I needed to improve on my actual task. Since the prelim task, I've also just had a greater experience on the Mac computers and using the specialised Canon cameras, things like that go into producing the magazine, and kind of how to research into what the genre requires and how to actually go from having a blank piece of paper to having, a plan and something that reflects what's already out there but also, is new and interesting for you and that you feel demonstrates all the skills that you've learned and also shows kind of your progression from someone who really had no experience on Photoshop, in design, researching this kind of media area, to someone who really understands what is required of the magazine and how to produce that.